All right. So today, as Dr. Compton mentioned, I want to talk about three different terms, Hebrew terms that are used throughout the Old Testament. So three terms, concepts from the Old Testament used throughout: Mishpat, Hesed, and Shalom. And first I want to give some background as to why I'm even doing this. And I'll warn you / apologize at the forefront. I'm a professor of English and not of theology. So Dr. Fraser, if I'm off on something, be nice. And I apologize. I learned just enough from the theological dictionary to be dangerous. So why did I go with these three concepts, and what's the point? Well, to start off with, I taught Comp 1 here at LeTourneau in the fall of 2013. And we have 6 learning outcomes. They're actually quite similar between Comp 1 and Comp 2. They cover various things connected with rhetorical analysis, critical thinking, speaking, use of technology, these sorts of things. And throughout the semester, I focused on getting the first 5 outcomes that are very much connected with what the curriculum is about. Our 6th outcome is integration of faith into the course. How do we do that? And I think during that semester, I approached it a little too subtly, because by the end of the semester, when my students were doing reflective exercises looking back over the work that they've done over the semester, the common comment that I got was that faith wasn't emphasized very much. And so this was a big problem for me, because it's something that is obviously important to the mission of the university, but also important for my goals as a professor. So the first thing is the 6th learning outcome, that challenge of how to actually integrate that into my course. So the next thing was over Christmas break, I started reading Richard Foster's Streams of Living Water book. Richard Foster is probably most well known for his book, The Celebration of Discipline. He is the director of an organization called Renovare, which is an ecumenical organization interested in sort of promoting various streams of Christian thought and practice. And this book goes into 6 different types of Christian practices, including things like, the evangelical stream, or the charismatic stream, or the liturgical stream. Well, one of those streams that he talks about is the social justice stream. And within that, he does a discussion of the book of Amos, and he presents these 3 terms, Hesed, Mishpat, and Shalom. I really enjoyed that. I was really inspired by that. And so the next thing that I did was I did a devotional in my Comp 2 class. And as I was putting that together and thinking about it, I thought this would be actually a really good programmatic idea, a really great concept or theme that the students might resonate with. But how to do that was what I was not sure about. We have a number of different heuristics. We have a number of different important concepts that are central to rhetoric that I didn't feel like needed to be replaced or supplanted, because they need to have that preparation. So rather than a new heuristic, perhaps, talking about what's already existing within the rhetoric curriculum, but framing it with these 3 terms. Another reason for that is that the terms are too broad anyway to work very well as a heuristic. You can't really break up, oh, well, I see obviously Mishpat here, I see Hesed here. They do more as sort of a way of envisioning the whole idea, getting the big picture. So the other benefit of this is that these 3 terms really deal with how you treat the other. And arguments, presenting a stance on a particular issue in order to persuade or convince somebody of what you think or believe, that implies an other. Argument implies an other. And so how you relate to the other is central to how you approach composition and to argument, because we're always writing to an audience. Okay? It's always external communication. So that was another reason why I thought that this would be an effective approach. So let me just give you a quick rundown of the three different terms and how those might apply specifically to things that we try to cover in Comp 2. So first of all, Mishpat. One thing that you will see about the three terms is that they're very wide-ranging types of terms, and it's very difficult to nail down a specific English equivalent for each of those Hebrew terms. Generally, you would see Mishpat translated as justice, but it goes beyond simply like juridical use. It's going to go beyond the courts or lawyers or judges. It also has social, ethical, and religious connotations. This is what Foster says. And going on to include things like custom and established practice. The Theological Dictionary of the Old Testament says that Mishpat stands as an absolute entity, almost a world order, the God-given norm to ensure a well-ordered society. So we're sort of looking at this whole systemic view of justice or a just society. And also because of that large picture, law and commandments, particularly God's commandments, are central to this concept. So that's sort of a basic idea of what Mishpat is. Now, the key characteristics to take from that, the objective right, the universally binding norm, this sort of almost looking at justice externally. And here I need to counter that with another Hebrew term called tzaddik, which has more to do with almost like individual righteousness. And Weber, the one who refers to Mishpat as objective right, would say that tzaddik is sort of subjective right? How the individual makes a decision about what is right or what is just in interactions. So I went with Mishpat as a key concept because it's more external, it's systemic, it's institutional. These are the sorts of topics that I would want my students to focus on, right? Justice within the world, and not necessarily, well, this individual, like how am I going to go about my day being righteous, okay? So pervasive, all-encompassing and prescriptive, how justice should be employed, how it works within institutions. Now, how does that actually apply to the Comp 2 class? Well, really in the first steps of topic gathering and of determining why you want to write and argue, okay? So exigence, first of all, that thing that prompts you to write at the beginning. I would want to encourage my students to sort of almost have like the eye of the prophet, to see where there is mishpat or where there's a lack of, more importantly, right? Where is the absence of justice they see within their local community or perhaps on a national or global level? So the prompting to write about something that's really crucial about human interaction in important current events. And that brings me to Kairos also. So you want something that's in the moment, something that's timely. You want something that's going to have relevance to the audience that's reading it. So prompting them to write about things that are happening in current events on the national or international scene. Even going to a local level. If they can find something that's happening, say, in Longview or maybe even in Texas, where they could deal with this question of justice would be fantastic. And then Mishpat helps us get to what we would call stock issues, which is a rhetoric and debate set of heuristics, okay? Mishpat helps us see a need, right? If there's a lack of justice, if there's this particular conflict, if there's corruption or disagreement among people about a particular issue, that shows the need. We need to solve this problem. We need to rectify this instance of injustice. Okay, the significance of that, like how does it apply to the people that we're writing to? How does it apply to our audience? And then finally, inherence, that there is actually something that needs to change. We can't leave this to solve itself. If we don't do something about it, it's not going to get better. So using writing as a way of intervening and hopefully, influencing some sort of change. So I really see mishpat and justice as this sort of like first initial stage in terms of composition and the writing and research process. Next we move on to Hesed, and I can't do the guttural, I won't keep doing the Hesed, but that's how it should be pronounced. like I said about Mishpat, Hesed is such a broad term. Generally, it's translated as things like loving kindness, steadfast love. Foster says that graciousness, courtesy, and compassion are central to the term. Hesed always designates not just a human attitude, but also the act that emerges from this attitude. Okay, so you see here that the first characteristic is activity. Okay. Additional characteristics, it's social, right? You show Hesed, you show loving kindness, you show generosity and compassion to somebody else. There's an expectance of mutuality, and that implies Hesed as being a crucial, cohesive quality of good society or good community, right? We interact with each other, we exchange loving kindness, we exchange compassion and service towards one another. And then along with that, then, we want a community that endures. And so the expectation is that Hesed continues. And that the results and the effects of Hesed continue long after that initial act. Okay. An additional key point about Hesed is that it's not just between people, but we have that expectation of having a Hesed relationship between us and God as well. God obviously shows loving kindness, steadfast love to us, and there's the expectation that we respond to that. Our acts of worship have this Hesed component. And that's really good because possible limitations of Hesed, being about just the community or being about your family or the people that are closest to you, might cause students to be exclusionary in how they think about showing loving kindness, right? Well, I want to show compassion to my Christian brothers and sisters, or I want to show compassion to the people that live on my side of the neighborhood, but I don't have to do that to the people that are non-Christian or of the other political side of the spectrum, right? So that idea that this is not just interpersonal but also personal to God sort of expands that concept for them. So here, in the next sort of stage of writing, I think Hesed is really important. First of all, it emphasizes the mutuality of argument. Okay, that it is interpersonal, that you're interacting with somebody else and you want this sort of respect and courtesy and consideration. So that helps them also think about how they want to approach their target audience. How are they going to show loving kindness to the people that they're writing to, even if they're disagreeing with their target audience, even if they're trying to show that their target audience is wrong or misled about something. How do they convey that, communicate that in terms of Hesed? And then along with that, then, their authorial persona is going to be important, right? How am I presenting myself as an author within what I'm writing that's going to enable people to show that I'm giving them compassion? Along with this comes listening to perspectives that are different from our own. Compassionately, critically, yes, but having that consideration and respect for the dignity of our audience and the people that we may be arguing with. And then, of course, finally, ethical research practices, right? We show Hesed, we show consideration by respecting the research and the work of people that we're reading. And we display that research, we display that work, giving them due credit. Okay, that we can extend the idea of scholastic integrity beyond simply like legal ramifications or ownership issues to a reminder of the dignity of the individual and his or her work. So Hesed sort of fits into this sort of the central writing stage of composition. And then finally, Shalom, which is a hard concept to exactly nail down for how it specifically applies to composition, but I'll give it a shot. Shalom I think, is probably the most wide-ranging of these terms. Different scholars that I read said, it's the elemental aspect of human life. It's wholeness of relationship of communion, harmonious equilibrium, balancing of all claims and needs, ordered stability of the world, stable order within the realms that makes life possible, right? So we're talking about stability in things like politics, in terms of international relationships, in terms of the economy, in terms of day-to-day interactions with the people on the street. All of these sorts of things. So wide-ranging, so all-encompassing. So how can we possibly translate that into a writing strategy or a way of looking at composition or writing? Well, first of all, originary and eschatological. Shalom has these characteristics, right? Because we're looking both back nostalgically to our Edenic existence, pre-fall existence, but also looking forward, right? New Jerusalem. The idea that the Lord does make all things right. And as his followers, we want to contribute to that, right? He calls us to join with him in that redemption and restoration process. And going on to the next point, restorative, right? That we want our writing to have this idea of bringing about some sort of wholeness and completion, or at least contributing to that in some way. And then once again, implying relationship, right? That this happens by engaging with others and trying to improve the lives of others through how we interact with them, through how we communicate, through our writing. Okay, so how does that play out in more practical things? First of all, purpose. This was something that I was actually able to start employing with my Comp 2 students when they started choosing topics in my spring class this past semester. One of my main questions for them is, how can my writing benefit people? Okay? Why are you writing? It's not just going to be for an exercise that you're going to turn in for a grade, but what is it about this topic and what you feel passionate about arguing that's actually going to help people? Okay? So having that framework as the outcome is your writing is supposed to improve the lives of the people that are reading it. So that intended outcome needs to guide the writing strategies. Okay? Once again, like the idea that you might disagree with the people that you're trying to argue with, but your desire is for them to get to a better place in how they think about this issue or how they look at things on a day-to-day basis. And then finally, we get the last two stock issues that are covered, right? Shalom should inform them on the plan that they're going to implement if they're trying to come up with a solution for some issue of injustice, and also the advantages, right? Thinking of how their audience is going to benefit. Okay, so that's sort of a very fast, action-packed overview of those three terms. But I wanted to show you just kind of how that plan would work out in the 15 weeks for a course. I would think of Micah 6:8 as a very good sort of focal verse to start with my students. He has told you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justice, Mishpat, to love kindness, Hesed, and to walk humbly with your God. The actions of those then, so I pointed out that Mishpat and Hesed are within this quote, but then this action of following what God is calling people to do would hopefully bring about shalom, right? So during the first 5 weeks, I would frame the rhetorical strategy similarly to how I just did at lightning speed, but spending a lot more extra time with my students explaining how these things work together, as well as doing a reading of the book of Micah. Why Micah? Well, I looked at Amos first, but I felt like Micah, especially since the focal verses from that book, had really good instances of this is injustice versus justice, this is Hesed versus not. Has a fantastic vision of shalom in the last chapter that I think the students would be able to latch onto very well. So I would start in the first week with this sort of quick reading of Micah, and then explain the rhetorical strategies with the three virtues in the first third of the class. In the second third of the class, it would be focused on Hesed as they're gathering research, as they're beginning to do drafts and figuring out how to incorporate the voices of the people that they're interacting with, right? The different sources that they're gathering about their topics. And then finally, in the third section, as they are putting together their final draft, they are both interacting with their peers in community, helping each other improve their writing. But I thought that would be a very good opportunity for discussions of other readings, examples of other people that are seeking to right injustices through their writing. So course time would be taken up with these reading discussions as they are working on their drafts. Then finally, connected with this in the third section of the class, after they had finished a term paper, which we all tend to have this idea of it being for a very narrow audience, especially for them, they're thinking, well, this is just going to my professor and it's going to be gone after that. I don't have to think about it afterwards. I would really want to push my students to adapt it to a different medium that would actually approach the audience that would be most affected by the thing that they're writing about. This would bring in perhaps a multimedia component, but it certainly would show them that their writing has a greater effect beyond just simply the boundaries of our class or the semester. So I'll zip through this section here, but different things that can be brought in that would add to this use of the concepts would be current events, obviously. Social media, ways of tracking those major, kairotic, I guess is that a word? But those major issues that they're discussing through current events, seeing how people respond to it, and maybe doing analysis of how those issues are discussed within social media, and critiquing the dominant ways that they see people communicating about these issues. Like I said before, academic paper, changing it to perhaps a different mode or medium, figuring out what that form of writing would be for the target audience. And then also, like I said, using Mishpat, Hesed, and Shalom in others' writing. I would love suggestions on writing in many disciplines too. There are, I think, with some thought and some time put into it, we could see how these three concepts fit into different subject areas, not simply within the humanities, but how can we see these things played out within the sciences and engineering, right? Certainly questions of ethics in terms of scientific research, certainly in things like problems that are solved through applied sciences, business practices, right? Financial ethics, all of these sorts of things produce writing as a means of solving problems, of restoring justice, and of hopefully promoting greater interaction among people. So as you have suggestions like that, please give them to me, because I would love that sort of multidisciplinary writing to show to my students as examples. Okay, so benefits and pitfalls. I think benefits would be that it's forcing the students to an others-centered view rather than fixated on their personal interests, right? It gets them to, like I said, that prophetic eye, getting them to look at other people and the lives that those people are experiencing. The use of Hesed, I feel like, is going to be less relativistic than what we typically use to talk about conciliatory writing. Carl Rogers, psychologist, writing mainly in the 1970s, I believe. Rogers has this approach to argument that involves listening, being able to give your interlocutor feedback, and then going from there. So it's a very sympathetic, compassionate way of arguing, which is great, except that Rogers tends to take that into a relativistic way. Like